We're live.
Welcome back, Income-Based Education Tax Study Committee. It is 12:30 something, and we are wrapping up our work in the next hour by finishing up the conclusion of the report and the next steps section, and then having a conversation about what the legislation might contain or not contain. So. Julia and Abby, I wonder if it makes sense for you to come back to the table.
Back up.
It just seems easier.
We have conclusions and then draft
The
legislation.
conclusion will just summarize the introduction, as all
Book report.
reports do. And the next steps, from my perspective, is less like these are the steps that must be taken and more these are the things that must be figured out in order to finish this project.
You mean in order to?
In order to create this policy, yes. And so I guess it's really just a list of outstanding issues. So do you have a list of outstanding issues already? If I were you, I would.
For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel, that was pretty much exactly what I'd put in my question marks for what would be in the conclusion. My only concern was I don't want us to be in a position of deciding what the next steps are and what are really the big, but listing them as things that need to be resolved feels like a policy decision. So we have flagged throughout the report, the General Assembly should look at this, or the committee recommends that this, take further consideration. So I could go through and highlight the few that come to mind. One that's small and again feels like maybe not something you want to put in the conclusion, since folks often look at the executive summary and the conclusion to get their big takeaways. But one that just popped into mind was the discussion about will LLCs be sort of a workaround for the renter to enable to get the renter? Do you want to highlight that in this? Perhaps not. The rates, I think that's probably the primary
Rates and brackets.
question. I'm imagining draft language with placeholders at this point, just literally brackets with no numbers, but just to show what the structure would look like. That said, even getting to the point of saying this is how many brackets, that is a policy decision. Is that what you're going to say?
Yes. So rates, brackets, number of brackets, trust fund. Not called trust, stabilization fund, thank you. Stabilization fund.
We haven't dealt with trust funds.
No, I just never should have been meeting. Stabilization fund, what else?
The non-homestead categories, that was highlighted as something to be addressed. I don't know if you want to list that.
I also think transition, everything to do with the transition.
Right.
That would look like, what it would look like, what the timing would be.
Timing is-
I think on the LLC question, I might speak about that more broadly, just in terms of sort of opportunities for
Tax avoidance.
tax avoidance or tax,
Overall, not in that particular instance.
Okay. The other issue we haven't looked at when it gets to the should is the impact on taxing capacity and the ability of the general fund, the impact of taking out that income tax revenue capacity, if it's there, on the general fund's ability to raise money for other priorities.
Then you need to study the opposite of the growth in income tax capacity based on the elimination of the property tax.
That would be part of that discussion. And I know I've had one members, more than one, say to me, well, is property going to remain untaxable? Are we just cutting out your house is not considered?
How could
Yeah, I mean, is part of it, but that'll be another discussion.
I wonder if we could like, that's another opportunity to just say more broadly, like, you know, the long-term impacts to our overall,
Tax and capacity,
Interplay.
yeah,
the interplay of this with other issues.
right.
Other opportunities, whatever.
I keep wondering back to this question of rates of, I could see us saying, you know, in order to fulfill the directive to create a bill, the draft legislation, you know, we picked X, Y, and Z. And recognizing there are much more data that we need to have and some policy, you know, analysis that needs to happen. But that might be a way to actually file the bill and create some placeholders, but we've got, you know, we're gonna have a couple of the tables that show sort of the range. I don't know what people think about that, but that just strikes me as a way of softly having something for people to look at.
I don't think I know what you mean.
Well, let's say I guess it depends what people want to have come out of this. It is entirely possible that this report generates real attention around the state. I mean, the media, for instance, would look at it. If there's no actual proposal, nothing for people to compare other than some of the broad principles we're talking about here, it's not really going to generate any interest, I don't think, in the more public setting. So this is a balance of, you know, we've heard people say, like, we don't want to say this is what it's going to be, and then we learn more and it gets massaged. And on the other hand, if we don't say anything, then people can't decide whether they like it or not, or hate it or not. And so to me, I would err to actually giving them something and hope that it generates really overdue conversation, I think. And
Are you saying that I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you saying this in the context of the draft legislation?
well, I think
Context of the conclusion section?
Well, I
or
think
somewhere else?
they could go together. I think you could say, in our conclusion, you know, in order to fulfill the obligation of a draft bill, we have put forward, you know, assumption A, B, and C. For instance, brackets that we did on the table 3, 15%, you know, assumption on renters' implication for how much of their rent goes to the property tax, you know, and put it in the conclusion, but couch it in, we were sort of asked, the charge was to create a bill, so this is what we've done. In other words, it's a little softer than, it's not a recommendation because we don't have enough data to truly recommend, but it is a structure. I'm just worried that if we don't do something close to that, this just is not going to generate much discussion other than if legislators.
I'm trying to think of this from the perspective of a newspaper reporter. I mean, I think table 1, table 3, and the associated line graphs would, I think a reporter could look at that and current law it is what it is. It's in the Ed Fund Outlook, you know. I think they could write an article to explain.
But yeah, I don't know maybe where the tables go in this report.
Right, I'm not sure we decided that, did we?
Yeah, well, we've got the tables in the report, and I thought we had settled on the first and the last in the line graphs that go with them.
Right.
But now we're talking about the legislation, and we could say, yes, the legislature shall enact, you know, an income tax for you know, for the support of education, and let it go at that, which is kind of what we've gotten in the past. But we've done much deeper dive than anybody as a group has done. And so I think, Chris, what I'm hearing you saying is we should put in a bill that says, you know, there shall be an education income-based tax with the support of education, and it should remove the property, and, you know, but only the house and 2 acres are exempt, the next 10. And, you know, the tax rates to, and renters should get this 15%, you know, rebate, and give as more detail, because we've fleshed out more detail than in the past, rather than just, it would be nice to do this.
Yeah, the way I think of it is, it's an opening draft, just like any bill of significant change. You know, the committees, if they take it up, are quickly gonna look at these decision points, and we can outline them here. And say, okay, those knuckleheads over the summer said it's 15% for renters. Who can, let's chew on that. But if we don't even give them that, I think, I think we do the whole process a bit of a disservice. The public discussion and our, you know, and I'm sensitive to, and I agree with, we don't want to be saying, here's what you should do. Here's, if you want to do it, here's the way to do it. We're just saying, if you want to do it, here's, you know, a model that we've come up with, and all of the questions that you'll have to really get comfortable answering.
Right, but that.
And to me, that would be part of the conclusion. And you could kind of, you could almost blame the decision, like on the fact that we were charged to come up with a bill. You know what I mean? As opposed to just a bill with empty brackets. That's less interesting to me. I just think, you know, look, the headline is Legislative Study Committee figured out how to zero out property tax for schools. I mean, that is an interesting topic that people might want to talk about. And it's way less interesting if it just ends up in like, I don't know.
And you think we would accomplish that by putting those rates in the conclusion and in the bill?
No, I don't think we need the rates in the
simple.
conclusion. I think somewhere, we need to publish something. And to me, it wouldn't be in the appendix where we're trying to hide it, sort of. I would put it in there, and I'm seeing that people are a little hesitant to getting too far in front of it. And so I'm trying to think of a way to put something out there that is as least an endorsement as possible.
I'm perfectly comfortable putting those 2 tables and graphs into the body of the report.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
fine.
does one of them get absorbed into the bill?
I think placeholders in the bill make sense.
I mean, you don't write a bill saying this is it. You write a bill saying this, based on what we came up with, these are the rates, these are the brackets that, you know, our these are the rates, these are the brackets in the bill. The committee's going to do what they feel like. But I think we need to put a rate and a bracket in the bill. We're comfortable, given what we know, that this is, you know, you could juggle it a little bit, but this is the rate it's going to take to raise the amount of money we need to raise. And if we don't want to say that, I mean, what are they going to do if we say we're not going to develop? I mean,
that's where I'm coming from.
yeah, I mean,
So you're saying, so these illustrative numbers that we've come up with, that you want to include those in the language?
well, I mean,
I mean, I'm just asking, that's,
I mean, when I usually get a tax bill, it doesn't say we will increase the rate. It says the rate will go up 2.5, 2.3, 7.9, whatever percent in these brackets. I mean, you get something concrete generally in a bill, not and you don't say reference the study, you say, it will be phased in, and I've heard, when are we doing it? 25, 20?
What, doing what? The people-
Starting it after, I mean, you do it in a starting date after
the
the
waiting's all,
After the waiting's over.
over.
so it's 28 or 20.
Yeah. I mean, why put in a bill that is, the report can be fairly general, but if we're going to put in a bill, it's got to have.
We don't have to put in a bill, we're just drafting bill
Yes.
language.
Right, we're just drafting bill language.
But I maybe you're saying better than I've been saying. Leave the report sort of where it is, put the tables in there, which immediately makes it hard for someone to read the report and think we've come up with a proposal. It's a range. But the bill, we pick something. And that way, if people are doing some digging, they would find, which is our sort of starting point recommendation or something.
But they'd be the same numbers that are in the report.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And we'd have to deal with this renter.
I feel like putting it in a bill is a recommendation of those rates, and I'm not ready to recommend those rates. And maybe there's a difference between us putting forward a bill as part of a report and me sponsoring a bill, but I certainly wouldn't
Yeah.
sponsor a bill unless I was ready to recommend those rates. And so it feels to me like it's an implicit recommendation of those rates, which I'm really not ready to do. Because there are outstanding policy decisions that would have to be made for those rates.
But every bill that you file, there's outstanding policy decisions.
Sure,
Then
Right, but you've made the decision to support it, like, okay, at least I support this, what's being written. How would we decide?
so I mean, I think, so it's just, there's no right or wrong. There is, to me, if this is successful, it will generate a real public discussion about this concept. And I'm not at all convinced you can do that unless you give some framework of actual numbers so that people actually pull out their calculator and put a comparison to where they are.
But aren't we doing that by including the tables in the?
Well, I mean, it's less because you've given them two options. I guess they could.
And I don't think it's two options in the report. I think it's just the first table is there. It's just one option. The first table is just there to demonstrate how numbers work.
Well, so why don't we? Yeah.
Okay. Abby, you've been drafting as we've been going along? Maybe it would be helpful to see what you have. And if we can, if we can say, okay, this works, then we can say, but I'd like to add.
I don't think she's that far along.
You don't think it's that long?
I do not have anything prepared for today.
Okay.
Like, that I was waiting to have conclusions so that I have been drafting little bits and pieces, but nothing
That's all held together.
like.
I want to go back to our charge. Our charge
Thank you.
is to come up with language for a bill, not to sponsor a bill, not to put in a bill. So, I mean, I don't see, this issue I don't think it's a big deal whether we do it or we don't do it. Therefore, it seems like a bill language is does include, as you said, that information.
Right.
I think bills contain placeholders too, though, sometimes.
Yes, they
right?
can. And in our draft, since we're not actually putting in a bill, we're just coming up with suggested language, it can say the following is meant as a placeholder. Then you say, well, then why put it in at all?
It doesn't even say bill, it just says, which shall include proposed legislative language.
Yeah.
So that's even less.
Isn't that a bill?
No?
What is proposed legislative language if not a bill?
Can I make sure we're wrapping up the other thing with enough of a bow? So the report itself,
You want to get back to the conclusion, do you?
is that okay? Team?
Well, they're very connected.
They are very connected,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's why.
Well, what's outstanding in the report? We've decided on the graphs and lines and tables that are going in. We've got the questions that we did not get to that will have to be dealt with, the brackets, the rates.
Are there any other outstanding issues in the report that we haven't said out loud as part of the?
Can I just, rates and brackets, I guess I would throw in and caps. I know I keep going.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
thank you for remembering that.
We can certainly go through the report and double check for anything that we've spelled out, that's written in the report as the committee considered but has not reached consensus or has not reached recommendation, or I forget the wording that we agreed on this morning, but whatever that wording is, and we can pull a list of that together, which would include caps also.
And the renter credit, how that will shake out in terms of the percentage, but also some definition, if that were something to be worked on by a committee. And then also the municipal circuit breaker. Which also has some, and when I'm thinking about drafting them, those both have some pretty big outstanding questions. So when I would bring a draft for you to review, there will be things that there will be unanswered questions. They won't necessarily be, bracketed language highlighted, but you'll maybe have questions looking at it and think, oh, that's not really answered here because it's not a clear recommendation. So there's the stabilization reserve, there's the other impacts as highlighted already in that last paragraph. The transition, as we said, stabilization reserve, I noted taxing capacity in general, opportunities for avoidance, and then pupil weighting as well within the transition section. That's also to be considered for both dates and the impact on education spending.
And I think that there's also the consideration of, with respect to outstanding questions, there's like the structural questions that we've talked about here, but then there's also potential policy considerations and questions that are yet to be explored. Should those also be included?
Such as?
Just things like the potential burden of withholding employers, or
But they're already doing withholding, right?
I don't think we need to include, I think people will find their way to those.
Okay.
If we haven't named them at some point already, I feel like.
Okay.
people find
it's
their way.
really just a structural. That.
Yeah.
Well, when a
that the
committee
has
takes,
spoken about.
takes it up, if we find out that there are a significant number of employers that do this stuff, that it's not it's per town, where everybody lives. So we'll hear from them.
I just wanted to confirm when we're talking about the list of questions, what the scope of that list of questions is.
Structural.
Yes, that's helpful.
Once it goes public in the form of a bill, if it reaches that point, we will hear from members of the public and others. And I'm sure there are problems we never even thought about. But we will hear, and we can only flag the ones that we know that still need to be addressed. So I have a feeling the appropriations committees may have a different take on this.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just thought of one more question.
Thank you.
Which you may have mentioned, Abby, but it's that percentage used to calculate the new renter credit.
Yes.
Okay.
Abby knew that one. I do think that the homestead, the circuit breaker, I think we were sort of clear on what should be done. We just think maybe it could be improved in the future, and I want to make sure that we're clear about that.
In terms of because you were debating is proposed legislation a bill or not, the way that the language would be organized, I would draft it as though it were a bill Otherwise, I could draft it as more of a report, but this is, what this section would look like. That might be easier to understand and to allow more commentary, like that exact point about the renter credit, but that's up to the committee.
I mean, seems pretty likely that you'll be asked to draft a bill,
It's possible.
Possible you've already been asked to.
so.
It's always possible. The request deadline is another month away.
You mean sort of an annotated bill?
I don't know if that's what you'd like to see.
Does it make more work for you if you're gonna have to draft a bill anyway, to do the annotated version and then draft a bill, or is that kind of what you do anyway?
Yeah.
A little bit more, but it would allow you to have those additional. I'm just seeing myself trying to walk through and say, oh, but this isn't addressed here.
Yeah.
So I can try to do that and then.
Well, the advantage to that is, back to this rate question, it allows you right in there to say, this is just for purposes of a model. Whatever the renter percentage is, this was their dartboard attempt to figure it out, That might, I don't know if that feels better for not looking like you're endorsing it particularly.
What does that look like in the bill? Or the
Well, it looks like a-
legislative language?
Well, it looks like just legislation with a footnote, not a footnote, but an inline note, an author's note.
That says,
the committee did not endorse these rates, but offer these as one of the models that could be a starting point.
Like for the renter rebate, the language would say 15%, but then that 15% would be highlighted or something. It's like 15% is just a starting point, or couching that 15%.
Yeah, 15% is, that's mid-range. You've got 21 and, but
But you,
the other thing, the rate table, I think if you're putting in legislation, you normally would put in a rate. I'm hoping that some of those other, well, maybe not. They aren't going to come up in with a funding source. So, but this is changing the funding source. So we're probably going to have to do, I would think, rates ranging from and to the, those, we should put in a bracket. They'll change it. Put in brackets and rates.
is the report tied up with a bow?
I think so.
I know I seem very rigid right now, but I'm doing it
what's
anyway.
the conclusion say?
I know Senator
I
Pearson
think
wanted to have
just
something
your
about
review.
escrow in the conclusion.
Excuse me? What did you say?
We forgot
Senator Pearson
escrow.
wanted something about escrow in the conclusion.
What Chris Delia wants to put in.
Okay, and like
Chris
all
got
that's
bored and
okay.
left. He
Great,
was here.
okay. Great,
So we weren't
thank you.
putting
Okay.
a lien on it.
I feel more comfortable with an empty placeholder bracket in the legislative language.
Yeah, or just say the committee discussed a range of 10 to 15 or 10 to 20.
But
And I think that makes sense in the report. I think
Yeah,
it's
but not-
weird in legislative language.
yeah, in legislative language, you put something in, you don't say the committee discussed. You have to say,
Yeah, I mean, every letter and number in a bill is up to the committee to work on it.
Yeah.
Can change, right?
But that's also why it doesn't matter if there's one in there.
but they're declarative
so-
statements.
So you're a reporter. What's the headline? This study looked at zeroing out your property tax and doing what? And giving you some income tax instead. That's a pretty lame story. You're not giving them anything. Why not actually, I mean,
If you're a reporter, you'd go talk to people and then you'd get
We're assuming
quotes.
there's
right, so
reporters.
what are we gaining by making them come talk to us? And, I mean.
I think the report has,
The annotated bill allows us to put right next to the rates, this is a model only, the committee thinks there's blah, 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 blah.
So I feel comfortable with empty brackets in proposed legislative language and an annotation that talks about a range that the committee discussed. But I also don't know, I mean, I really feel like that's what the report does. The report's the annotation, and so there's no need to annotate legislative language that's going to be attached to a report.
It's for reader ease.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just never seen a bill that,
That had blanks in it?
yeah. That, I mean, it usually would say at a rate.
Apparently the House does it all the time.
Well, those
I
are for
certainly-
committee bills.
No, not even committee bills. I've seen like a lot of,
No. I think a sponsored bill is going to have numbers in there.
Yes.
We're not talking about something that's going to be a bill. We're talking about language. I mean,
Bill language.
if any of us or any other member decided to take this language that we put forth and turn it into a bill, I'm going to guess that Abby is not, I mean, there's got to be numbers in there when that thing goes in as a sponsored bill. There doesn't have to be when we just say, this is just legislation.
Or at least something that says, and a surcharge shall be levied to raise the amount necessary.
Yeah.
Which is one way not to say anything. At a rate and number of brackets necessary to raise the money to replace the property tax.
I look at it this way. These are illustrative numbers. And I don't think that anybody would put illustrative numbers into a sponsored bill.
So could we say that there shall be, I know that's not, the illustrative numbers are in the report, and anyone that's really interested will read the report. But in the bill, you could say, there shall be an income tax set. I don't know if we call it surcharge, but a tax set based on local spending, and a relative number, or, you could just say at a rate to raise the amount of revenue, and the committee will get that number and then decide to bracket it out. But I think you have to say something about how we're going to raise the money.
In the language?
So I see that Abby's job is almost more writing a guide to somebody who wants to sponsor a bill with sort of instructions, like the section on this should look like this. The section on rates and brackets could look like this. The following is for illustrative purposes only. And then you can put in the language. I mean, that's sort of what I felt like when you were describing using reader notes, that you're essentially writing a guide to somebody who wants to sponsor the bill.
Do it.
In terms of, glomming on to something, if a reporter wants something or doesn't want something, this may not be the most responsible time for those numbers to be glommed onto. So I don't really have a concern about that. But again, it really doesn't matter because it's all going to get sorted out down the road.
And Chris, I think you want there to be an actual bill with actual numbers in order to move us forward from the more theoretical discussion we've been having for years.
I agree with that. And certainly when we, with its findings and recommendations for legislative action, which shall include proposed legislative language. I don't see, sure, I guess, if you want to not call that a bill, but that's meant to be a bill. That's
how I would interpret it.
So I just think like when Jake came in first, the very first discussion he came in, he pegged his whatevers to S221. That was his starting point. And we all heard that and went, no, 221 was such a year ago, this is not entirely relevant. But I think it was valuable. Like if he didn't have that starting point, it's just, So I don't love these brackets. They're not well informed. They are a potential way forward. And I think being very direct about an example enables a much better public conversation without having to endorse it or anything. And there's a bunch of punting in here, a bunch of that. And I think we undermine the whole process if we really punt on that huge question. After all, that is what people will want to look at. And now, do we have to defend it, till the end? I don't think that's realistic. I think that it can be very easily understood. Here are the rates they used to illustrate. Everyone on the committee said these are not hard and fast, but rather a model to illustrate. I think you undermine it if you don't put something in there. And I do think, when we drafted the chart for the study, it was very clear that there would be 8 million.
And that language came out of
No, Chris put that in on your side.
you got it on our side. All right.
You signed on to that.
Well, you won in committee, Chris. I'm not sure you're going to win here.
That's okay.
I think the House put the study for the tax department. And then we, between, have not met yet.
That's a good thing.
Okay.
Let's do January 1st.
January 1st.
The report from the tax department, yes.
On the subject that we're doing a report.
Yes, the parallel report. They get to be informed by all of our conversations.
And then
but
we're
we're not.
going into the session with all those other little issues floating around. All right. So consensus, I'm about to do the McDonald thumbs up,
That's sort of
thumbs
where I am.
down thing. We're running, yeah,
Because if we put it in, to say that the chart brackets and rates will have to be in the bill language, legislative language, then we have to say which of the 3 charts we want,
Or one of the other ones that we've seen.
or one of the other ones. So we have to have a discussion on that. And maybe that's an easy discussion. We've already decided that based on the tables, the chart that we want to put into the report. It seems like there'll be more discussion.
And I feel aware that we're leaving staff to do that without our guidance because we will cease to exist soon. And so I don't.
Which there,
There's only one table that it's actually.
That's close to our-
Real reflection of our work.
which is the
Table.
last one.
I mean, honestly, I think if anybody's looking at this, including a reporter, they're going to open it up and they're going to go to the picture.
Yeah.
They're going to go to the table.
So what are we, so let's just do it then.
Do what?
I mean, we should.
Write the bill with the brackets.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
I mean, I think we just undermine our efforts if we just punt on all of that and anyway, whatever.
Okay, so
Chris is a yes.
maybe, I don't know.
we're gonna do the thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, if our charge is to do the language, then to me, you do the language the way you normally would. You don't put charts and line graphs in there, but you put in, X number of brackets, tax rate, range of rates. Or you can just say, at a rate and bracket, number of brackets, there'll be a graduated tax, it'll go, to the amount necessary to cover education funding. And that, I'm not sure what else and then flesh it out some more from there. That doesn't mean that anybody is going to sponsor it or anybody, but it fulfills our mission
I think leaving it blank fulfills our mission. And I think putting numbers in legislative language rather than a report is an implicit endorsement of those numbers. And I can't implicitly endorse those numbers because I know they're huge. Will absolutely change when final decisions are made. Not like because of policy negotiations even, just because there's a little more work to be done on them.
So why can't we just say, an income tax, education income tax shall be imposed, and say a graduated income tax shall be imposed with the number of brackets and a rate necessary to meet the cost of education. And then we aren't putting anything in there. I don't know how much more.
Abby, do you feel able to draft something that left that decision out?
In terms of not having a rate?
Yeah.
I think that would be somewhat ambiguous, which raises constitutional issues. In terms of actual legislation.
Right, you couldn't actually.
Actual legislation.
Couldn't
Yeah.
pass the legislation.
It certainly couldn't pass, I'm saying, in terms of an addendum to the report.
Yes, I can draft it however you like. Just another thought on how it would be presented. Would it, as opposed to an additional annotated bill, would you like the legislative language to be slotted throughout the report?
No.
So it would just still be appendices or an appendix?
Yeah, it's an independent bill, which will get the concept into a committee.
I think just the language that you were proposing would work as this is a direction to an eventual sponsor, but would be difficult to propose as actual.
As an actual
I think
bill.
that's where I'm getting a little about. I think it's more of you can draft it with here's a tax that shall be imposed on this tax base, and then you have a table or no table along the lines of the income tax marginal rates that are in existing law.
Okay.
Are there numbers or not? It's kind of crux for drafting it for me.
Would you be able to draft it with that number? Just leave that part blank as with stars?
Yes. I would use actual brackets. Maybe some mixes. Yes, that's part of the drafting process when working with sponsors is usually I'm working on an idea and then work with JACO to fill in the numbers. So could have a table that just doesn't have actual numbers in it. But it would still say, if it's following one of those examples, $0 to $15,000 of income for a single filer, or those income brackets will probably be empty, would have X rate.
And you would go to the sponsor or the committee, if it's a committee bill, and say, you gotta tell me what to add in here. Chris wants to pick a number to have in there to give the committees a starting point.
And the public.
Public has it in the report. You think the public's reading the
Legislators
legislative
don't
language?
read our reports.
Well, they're definitely not gonna read the legislative language.
Well, this one is shorter and has pictures. If we could throw in some cartoons.
If we take that a little further, and I'm totally undecided, and I'm not even sure I care enough, because I think the ultimate result is that somebody will present a bill and say, the committee put this in there, as for illustration only, you need to come up with better numbers. And now I forgot where I was going with the whole question, so never mind.
So if we're talking about headlines, the report is readable by a reporter or skimmable by a reporter. And the legislative language will be released and a headline when someone actually sponsors it and it
That was what I
hits
was-
and it gets sent to committee.
Where is our language, once we come up with our draft, where's it going to reside? As an appendix to the report? Seems to me that's probably where it lives.
What, the legislative language is an appendix?
Generally, most
Yeah.
reports,
Okay.
it's not built into the report because it's so lengthy.
Okay. Representative Beck, I haven't heard from you.
I would be inclined just to, I think people are going to read the report. We'll put the illustrative numbers in the report, and I think leave it out of the language.
Okay.
Somebody wants to make it a sponsored bill, then they got to put the numbers in there. Maybe they take ours, maybe they take somebody else's, I don't know.
I'm just saying somebody else's. I'm looking at somebody else's.
My reluctance is this is Senator Pearson's last legislative event.
It would be.
You want to give them a win?
Yeah.
Where do you see the tables going in the report?
I think they're integral to it.
You mean like what?
They're not at the end.
Like what page do you see them going on?
Where are they?
14 was where you had the discussion, that's where the language is saying progressive tax rates and income brackets, and that the committee has not landed on set numbers.
Okay, under the tax rates.
Tax rates.
Where would you put it? Can you say that one more time?
Page 15, I guess 14.
14.
And so we're showing one table for illustration of something you will never have, and one table that is closer to reality, right?
Of what we think reality will be.
Yeah.
Two tables.
560.
Figures.
Basically, I just don't quite understand sort of going around here and why. We're effectively putting a table out that is sort of our, not endorsement, but our best shot at a structure and caveating it all over the place. And so,
I guess I don't see it as a best, what did you say, best shot?
yeah.
I don't see it as a best shot. I see it as a reference point.
Right.
You're wondering why we're putting in the two.
I mean,
Just the one.
We're picking, so just pick, like really pick. And because it's caveated, because it needs to be, because it's not a fully big
And
thing.
it feels very well caveated, like the caveats in the report make sense to me. In legislative language, it's not a caveat anymore, it's a proposal.
But we aren't submitting it as a proposal.
Anyway, all right, that's fine. If those tables are in there, I mean,
I'll find you.
now it just seems sort of silly, but whatever. It wouldn't be the first silly thing I've had to say. Might be the last.
I'm sitting thinking we might have a tie on this one, so. I'm not sure if we flip a coin or what we do on it. So, Abby, you're looking at proposed legislation as just being attached to this report.
Yes, now I had suggested annotating it in the bill language. Would it just make more sense to have that be the conclusion? Because that's saying these are the further steps, and in the legislative language, you'll see in the appendix, these still need to be fleshed out. For example, the percentage
Okay.
of the renter credit.
That sounds good.
So you could put it in and do a yellow highlighted to be determined kind of thing in the bill language? Or,
Yes, that's kind of what I was initially suggesting when I was
Yeah.
saying annotated, but I think it would be easier to have it all in one place and then,
Okay.
I mean, that would be flipping back and forth, but it would all be, every point that I have on my, our list for the next steps are because those are not going to be addressed in the legislative language.
okay,
Hopefully that would work. And I think once I have language for you to look at, it will make more sense.
okay.
But I can also use highlighting, find some way to make it clear that
Well,
there are some gaps.
We've got, when do we die?
At 2. Do you mean the committee?
Yeah,
Well, we have.
At the end of the month.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important for everyone's health and wellness especially staff's health and wellness, that we wrap this today.
Yes.
Yeah. But we're gonna have to, obviously.
We're all gonna have to sign our
see it and-
virtually, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's my concern is we've sent staff home with an awful
We actually don't
lot.
need to sign it.
No, it's just a report.
Yeah.
And given our tendency to fine tune, and
Good fine tuning today.
we're all sitting around the table fine tuning to do it via, maybe we could, if you can do it, you gonna get any time off over the holidays?
That's why we're gonna make it as simple as possible, what we're asking her to do right now.
Yes. Well, I think the minute she sends it out to us, it's gonna cease to be simple.
No, because I think that we've,
Okay.
I don't think there's anything left to
do.
wordsmith.
Okay.
All the wordsmithing is done.
Okay,
We've wordsmithed today and before
today.
today.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, no, I think we have with the report.
yes.
It's the draft legislation.
And I think that's another good reason to leave things blank in the draft legislation is so that we
Okay,
can leave it on the table.
okay, if staff thinks that works, the committee can live with that. It may be the best we're going to get at this point in time. Next time we know we need more than 6 meetings. And you start earlier in the year.
Definitely, I mean, we started late in the year for a good reason that I wish we hadn't
Yes.
done, yes. I want to also, Senator Pearson, at the beginning of this meeting, you said, that we were picking apart the report and it was a great report. And I just want to say, we are like sort of ending our 6 times together with a lot of clear points on what we didn't get done, but we actually got an incredible amount done and moved this conversation forward in a way that it hasn't been moved
This-
forward. So,
This is the first time any flesh has been put on the bones. I mean, there's been the idea and it sounds good, but this is the deepest dive anyone's ever done into this. And
For this, nobody could honestly say that it could even be done
Yeah.
with a straight face.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we have that. Yeah, because I know Ways and Means has tried on numerous occasions.
A lot of people have, yeah.
And I only can remember one that made it to us, but it's not for lack of trying.
no, and so we've done some really good work over the
Yeah.
last 6 meetings, long
Yeah.
meetings, and had some incredible support from the two of you. Thank you very much. And from
Very much.
tax more behind the scenes, but appreciate their help too.
I think this lays up for the legislation very well. The committees and legislators that are interested have a good roadmap on what to do.
But they at least can look at the numbers and know what they're proposing.
And
You
they
know,
will have some
what the
draft
ranges are.
legislative language.
Yeah. Yes. With some holes where the numbers need to be put in.
So are folks ready to support the report pending final revisions?
Can somebody just explain what the conclusion is saying again? I wasn't really clear.
My understanding is that the conclusion is saying the same things as the introduction, and then also including a next step section, which is essentially, here are the outstanding issues that will need to be resolved in the legislation that's in Appendix 12.
So it'll say there's, in the conclusion, in addition to the opening recommendations, kind of that stuff, it'll say there's draft legislation in this appendix, but here are all the next steps / outstanding questions.
Would we have any room to say something like, talking about the virtue of, even why we looked at just a straight income versus the tweaks to swelling income sensitivity? In other words, this is, there's a lot more work to do, but this is sort of the outline to get to best adhere to the principles of fairness and equity, anything like that?
There was this, and one of the things that Julia presented,
Right.
there was a one-liner in there, a comment about how you couldn't really fix this system to get what we were trying to get to.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
You remember that
Yeah, so in
comment?
the report, we tried to capture that on page 13, which was considering adjustments to the property tax credit.
Right, yeah, that's where, yeah. Yeah.
So that's talking about how, like, pushing the balloon and the sledgehammer. And then there was also, when we were examining the,
I remember.
it was option 1 and option 2, if you recall, option 1 for
Yeah.
that minor
Okay.
homestead surcharge. And we didn't include in the report details on that because the committee decided to move on past that. There is in the appendix, on page 29, those 3 different potential options that the committee explored. If that was also what you're referring to, Representative Black.
Scott, are you looking for language to put in the conclusion?
I'm not sure what I'm looking for exactly, but I'll find it here in a second, I think.
I think
Okay.
that appendix A3 is really helpful. I think for somebody looking at this for next legislative year.
No, I mean, I'm ready to move this as of, the report as of today with the edits we've talked about and let these two get to work and we can sign it via email.
We don't have to sign it.
We don't have to sign it. We don't even have to do it.
You just have to say, yeah.
Presumably, we would have some sort of
Yeah.
affirmative check on it.
Yeah, I think we'd have to,
We don't have to do anything. We
Yeah.
are happy to, Ann and I'm going to speak for you.
That's
I'm
fine.
happy to email everyone to say like, hey, does this look cool? But there's no formal motions whatsoever after this.
Okay.
this is what we found out.
So I'll formally move that we accept this draft report as of today with any edits.
Okay.
Does anyone want a
Senator
second?
Beck has moved that we formally accept the draft with the edits that we've requested. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. I think that's 600. Okay.
Really?
Yes, I'm going to declare us adjourned.